Within the last decade, indie titles have become meteorically prolific. In the past, these games often lacked the funding for advertising and had to leap over many hurdles just to get their games onto storefronts. A typically pricey endeavor that individuals or studios without some pre-existing industry connections just couldn't do. But now with easy storefront programs and developmental tools available to the everyday man to get their games developed and published, a pretty ridiculous amount of games get dumped onto storefronts like Steam. A whole lot of these are admittedly low-effort, cheap asset flips, but thanks to the power of information and targeted analytics, you'll find a lot of these indie gems rise up to the surface. But there's still a lot of them turning up all at once, and not all of them gets as much media attention as they might deserve. So today, I'm here to show off 5 indie titles of 2023 that you might have forgotten about or missed out on. Keep in mind, this is not a list of the best games of the year. There's plenty of top 2023 lists out there right now, and you've most likely already tried them out anyways. Instead, these games, in my opinion, are great entries in their varied genres that might have got buried in the pile of other releases. So here they are, 5 games of 2023 that you probably missed. Released in September by developer Rundisk is Chants of Sennaar. This adventure puzzler sets you within a tower inspired by the mythical Tower of Babel, appropriately tasking you to learn the various shattered languages in order to ascend to the floors above. And it's this quest for language that gives Chants of Sennaar its magical touch. Throughout your adventure, you'll either converse with the locals or attempt to decipher signs in order to find the crucial information for progression, but you'll quickly find them to be initially incomprehensible. But through contextual clues, you'll begin to see the patterns of each individual language, slowly learning the words and grammar needed to work your way around. You legitimately are learning languages here, albeit very rudimentary languages. They all have their own grammar nuances, similar to real-life languages, meaning each new language will require unique deciphering. You're assisted in the study of a journal that quizzes you on which words correspond to what concept, which will solidify its meaning for you when you complete a set. But interestingly, you don't even have to use this journal to complete the game. Completing the journal will effectively translate and localize completed sentences for you, making them more comprehensible. But you could choose to simply rely on your guesstimations without the automatic translation. This core gameplay constantly rewards you with that aha moment, and it certainly feels great every time. What doesn't feel as good, however, are the stealth and action sections that you're forced into. These spots are thankfully rare, but when they do come up, they're littered with instant fail states and a generally muddy feeling due to the game's imprecise actions. They're a bit of a dampener to the game's enjoyment, but the general gameplay is great enough to let you forget about the occasional downsides. Personally, I've been looking forward to more games in this sort of investigative style, harkening to titles like Return of the Obra Dinn and The Case of the Golden Idol. Chants of Sennaar definitely scratched that itch, and I'd easily recommend it to anyone who is looking for games similar to the aforementioned titles.
Slaying her is probably doing her a favor.
Released in October by Black Tabby Games is Slay the Princess, a visual novel that heavily leans towards having choices matter. Visual novels have always been a bit of an odd goose when it comes to gamer space. Personally, I don't consider the majority of them to be actual games, but simply another storytelling medium, a lot of which are actually pretty great. There are exceptions, of course, such as the Ace Attorney series, Danganronpa, and the Zero Escapes being the popular exceptions that combine heavy narrative with gameplay problem-solving elements. Slay the Princess toes that line, leaning more towards being a straight visual novel, but derives its interactivity with the sheer number of options that it offers you, leading itself to a bunch of branching paths. The plot is immediately intriguing, where a faceless narrator tasks you, a stranger with no background, to go and slay the princess. From there, you're given different dialogue options to choose between, some of which simply give you more details on the current situation, while others will change the current state or move things along. But the interesting thing here is the number of options that you can affect the situation with. You could choose to grab a knife off the table before venturing onward, or opt not to, changing how events will play out in the future. Another great aspect here is, as always, the respect for your time. Visual novels can be immensely extensive with their runtimes, going all the way to potential triple-digit hours of reading. While Slay the Princess is by no means short, it consolidates its experience by having a lot of short stories linked by an overarching mystery, rather than long singular chapters. Each individual story is just long enough to be satisfying, which ties to each other with an ongoing epilogue, after which it takes you back to the start to try other options that you didn't before. The writing is solid and ties together well. The individual stories are quite varied in tone, giving you a different flavor for every start. The dialogue in the epilogues can be a little word dumpy, with the classic problem of having too many lines to explain absolutely nothing, but overall the plot inspired continuous playthroughs. It also supported full voice acting and a ton of art, letting you passively enjoy it without too much careful reading. With games like Doki Doki Literature Club, bringing the visual novel medium to a more mainstream audience, Slay the Princess carries on by showing how the genre can combine heavy reading with light gameplay elements into an enjoyable experience. If you're the type to shun the idea of reading games, then perhaps this won't change your mind, but if you've been interested in the genre or are looking for more of the genre to try, then Slay the Princess will be a great pickup for you. Released in August by developer Fivehouse is Deathbulge, Battle of the Bands, a traditional role-playing game based on a webcomic series since 2012. Remember webcomics? When you got weekly updates instead of the bi-yearly ones? Yeah, me neither. Indie RPGs are pretty much a dime a dozen these days, with the majority of them hailing some influence of RPGs of yore. Deathbulge is no exception, but differentiates itself from the crowd by its great production. The oddly named title originates from Dan Martin's webcomic series Deathbulge, though the game only loosely ties to its title's sake. Your familiarity here is optional. Instead, the game follows a modern absurdist plot in the styles of titles like Earthbound / the Mother series, taking you to locations similar or strange. It's all very nice hand-drawn assets when it comes to the characters and environments, which stay true to the style of its webcomic origin, instead of the pixel art often used in the genre. The music, being a battle band themed game, is nothing to scoff about either, with some great tracks all around. The writing though is what really caught my attention. Focusing on humor is not that uncommon when it comes to RPGs, but often you'll find the jokes to be either targeted to certain demographics or just be so safe that they rarely end up actually funny. And Deathbulge is pretty darn funny, while still retaining a coherent overarching story. It's not just the writing either, as the humor permutates all other aspects with the constant punchlines in the enemy and environmental design. The fact that you permanently kick down every door that you go through and can visually see the aftermath of every single one just doesn't seem to get old. I did find some weaker parts like the combat, though sporting a pretty unique take on the turn-based combat systems, felt unnecessarily bloated in mechanics when simple damage and heals was generally the best strategy for the majority of encounters. And the side quests, though a joy to read through, would occasionally drag on with its very basic objectives of fetch quests or kill X amount of enemies to progress. But overall, I still very much enjoyed it. It reminded me of the South Park RPGs, but replaced the more obtuse juvenile humor with some good solid laughs, sick music, and an overall good time. If the absolute sea of current indie RPGs available is something you're currently trying to navigate, then consider giving a look over Deathbulge, Battle of the Bands. Released in March by developer Free Lives is Terra Nil, a strategic builder game that Free Lives builds as a reverse city builder. The monkier of Cozy Games is a relatively recent appearance that generally classifies games with some combination of low stakes, pleasing repetition, multitaskability, and good vibes. Terra Nil is not exactly that. It's more accurate to say that it cycles between these traits over a round of gameplay. Unlike a typical city builder, where the objective is to focus on scaling and expansion, Terra Nil is about using resources available to you to achieve the specific objective of terraforming the environment back to its original state. And limited are your resources, as the system is set up in a way where your ability to terraform the environment is tied to a resource that is only gained by doing a good job terraforming. Bad structure placements or mistakes can drain you of these resources and ultimately end in a dead-end failure state. While that might sound like the antithesis of cozy, you'll probably find that reaching this state to be a rarity during regular gameplay. Like any average job, you're assisted by what is literally an employee's handbook, letting you know the uses of your tools as well as how and when to apply them. It's not explicitly holding your hand, but you're shown the right direction at each available step. So as long as you're paying at least a bit of attention, you'll find your way through. The general gameplay loop is to figure out how to reintroduce nature to the environment through your structures and terraforming tools, along with the resources already available on the land. Add some humidifiers to some grassy plains and it'll transform into a swamp, giving you access to boggy and aquatic life. Dehumidify it on the other hand, and you'll get some dry grass that you can burn into nutritious dirt and ash. You'll be heavily reliant relying on that handbook here, as throughout the game's 4 biomes, your objectives, effects, and tools available are almost completely different. The terrain within these biomes are randomly generated, giving Terra Nil its replay value loop, but the initial rounds through these biomes will keep you on your toes. And once you've gotten the hang of things, you can attempt some punishingly hard versions of each biome, which heavily limit your resources while dropping a ton of potential terrain traps that will ruin your run. These challenges are a puzzle, with possible dead-end game overs at every step. These require much more careful deliberation than the more chill prior experiences. Games like this can offer immense satisfaction from being able to visually see your progress as you work on the environment. Here, the visuals aren't anything too unique, but the way your decisions seem to make everything just spring to life or cause destruction, while gentle tune plays in the background, just makes everything that much more satisfying. Terra Nil truly isn't a city builder. As a matter of fact, it makes you remove all your constructions before you can conclude a game to leave nature as natural as possible. This lets the game break the usual genre confines, giving you reasonably length experiences instead of the nose-down grinds that games like it might be. Give Terra Nil a try if you want something that still embodies that feeling of coziness, but still has a respectful amount of gameplay experience that can be completed in a reasonable amount of time.
Don't forget to hack your hands back up.
Finally, released in July by John and Evan Szymanski, is My Friendly Neighborhood, a survival horror first-person shooter with puppets. In a year where Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, and System Shock had their remakes or remasters, a lot of indie survival horrors end up feeling dwarf in comparison. But while these shiny and nostalgic releases are certainly great, here we have a title that embodies what makes indie games comparably enjoyable, even with a far lower budget. My Friendly Neighborhood plays mostly like an older generation Resident Evil, with open explorable areas, limited save resources, non-permanent enemy deaths, grid-based inventory management, and contextual environmental puzzles. Any fans of the genre will find the gameplay familiar. There's barely anything here that's transformative or evolutionary to the experience on that front, but emulates these aspects very well. This already makes the game enjoyable with its faithful recreation of genre mechanics. But here we add on the concept and aesthetic of self-aware television program puppets, and now you have an amusing conceptual theme tacked onto its solid core. Mascot horror has become a popular subgenre over the last decade, with the releases of titles like Five Nights at Freddy and Poppy Playtime cutting deep into the mainstream. While My Friendly Neighborhood does seem to follow the concept, in execution, it lacks the distinct edge that those titles have, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's got the spooky tension, the puppets do come off as creepy, and there are moments here or there that can put you on edge, but it doesn't reach too hard with grotesque designs, gory scenes, or cheap scares. As a matter of fact, it seems like they legitimately combine the strange, abstract spookiness of these puppets with the homey comfort of daytime children's puppet programs. These puppets really just want to be your friend. They might want to put you in their mouth, eat your fingers, and bludgeon you half to death if you end up wronging them, but perhaps they're just a little bit misguided in their affection. The environment is fun to explore, taking you through a TV production studio, along with its surroundings, which gradually open up as you gain key items needed to unlock access to locations. The gunplay is a little imprecise and scrambly, but that feels appropriate to its survival horror monkier. You probably want to avoid puppets earlier on instead of gunning them all down, since they take a lot of hits from your inaccurate weapon to down, and are liable to get right back up anyways if you don't spend your limited tape resources to permanently tie them down, like torching bodies in other games. But the standout here is the voice work. The regular characters here carry some great voice work themselves, but the star of the show here is the incessant rambling of the puppets.
Oh, that's easy. It's what words are made out of.
You mean like the one that I see in my books? I remember those. A is for ephemelinatoid. B is for blastocyst. C is for cavernoma. And all the rest. D, E, F, gangrene. We're a
off of me.
A friend?
If other survival horror games build atmosphere through the grunts and groans of the likely undead, here the puppets really make the mood. Just hearing the Bert and Ernie ramblings echo around the corner is strangely disconcerting. As you listen to them monologue about their taste of their neighbor's fingers, it's hilarious. It's worrying. it's great. 2023 was a great year for survival horror releases, but with all the big budget AAA releases, it's easy to miss out on these indie gems. My Friendly Neighborhood might not have the big production values of those releases, but in on itself, it still hits the nostalgic familiarity along with its unique spin on mascot horror. I'd recommend this one a try. And here you are. There are definitely more games that could have found their way on this list, ones that I played, and definitely ones that I've forgotten or missed. If you yourself have played any indie releases that nobody seems to be talking about, let us know down in the comments to go check it out. Also, please do help us out by dropping a like and subscribe to the channel. Games are expensive, and these numbers can help me potentially gain more access to these games for review. So if you enjoyed the game, all I ask is for those little clicks. We also stream most days of the week on Twitch at twitch.tv/secondop. That's second op with the number 2. Live most days of the week playing different games like this almost every day. Checking us out and following us there will help me out a ton too. And remember, enjoy more games.